One is the idea of gratitude, right? So, gratitude is that feeling of thankfulness. But appreciation is more of demonstrating the gratitude. So so there's a practice, maybe every night you do the 3 good things, like Martin Seligman said. You know what I mean? I do the 5 good things every night because I try to juice it up a little. Obviously some nights are easy, some nights are harder, but we can always get to 5, whether it's, I saw this beautiful thing and whatever it may be. So I like that idea of really doing a small practice, feel good practice with kids. And then the next step would be appreciation, right? So I'm a big believer in going back to the old fashioned writing a thank you note, making cookies for the neighbor, helping someone take out their garbage if they're not really mobile or whatever it is, sort of even volunteering to walk dogs at a shelter. So I'm a big believer in going out and doing something and showing your appreciation, or maybe having a lemonade stand to raise money for refugees. So something that really shows their appreciation, I think, is good for kids.
Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. Here on the podcast, I share my experiences raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 16 to 26 and working with thousands more as a summer camp director over the past 3 decades. I'm the author of Happy Campers, and I frequently do workshops with parents, teachers, and summer camp professionals about social skills, connection, and happiness, topics I researched extensively for my master's in psychology.
Hey, Sunshine Parenting listeners, welcome to episode 175, which is first being released on Friday, March 25th, 2022. If you're new to Sunshine Parenting, welcome. And if you're one of my returning listeners, welcome back. It's been a while. I haven't been recording new episodes all the way since last spring, but I am going to be back periodically this spring and summer with some brand new episodes. So thanks for sticking with me as I continue to figure out how to balance doing this podcast with all the other things that I'm working on right now. This week, I'm talking with Maureen Healy, who I previously had on the podcast to talk about her excellent book, The Emotionally Healthy Child. This week, we're talking about her brand new workbook that's geared directly for kids in grades K through 8. It's called the Happiness Workbook for Kids, and I think you'll really like our talk and the workbook. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sunshine Parenting. I'm really excited to be back with a returning guest today, Maureen Healy, because she has a brand new book out called The Happiness Workbook for Kids. So welcome, Maureen.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Maureen, why don't you tell listeners a little bit about your background and what you do, because it's really right up my alley of what I'm interested in too.
Such a good question. I don't know why it's hard to talk about yourself, but let's see. My background is child psychology and really children's emotional health. My last book before this was The Emotionally Healthy Child for Adults, so parents and teachers and anyone who worked with children. So my passion and focus is really happiness and resilience education. So really giving kids the ability to bounce back from challenges and figure out, okay, what direction is happier and how to sustain that, knowing our world is always changing, and especially the last few years, which have been difficult for everyone.
Yeah, and I loved The Emotionally Healthy Child. We were just talking about it before we started recording. I looked to see when we talked about that book. So did that book come out in 2019 or 2018 or something?
It came out in I think December of 2018 or the fall of 2018. Okay.
So I really love that book. I actually just went back through my notes from when we talked and also from when I read the book. And there was so much good information in there that you wrote it for parents about kids, but it was also, I felt, resonated just as people,
Sure.
Things that we can all remember to do. So I'm excited that now, all the books you've written before have been for kind of parents, teachers, people who work with kids. So now this is, I think, your first book that's written actually for the kids. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's right.
Okay.
And so instead of playing sort of telephone with parents, the idea was that kids can go through it on their own in the classroom or at home. And of course, it's always sort of a dialogue with adults because some of the topics are big topics. But the idea that, most kids are smart kids. They can go through it. They can have their own emotional ahas.
Yeah, it's funny. My own kids are now, my youngest is 18 and my oldest is 28. So they're all adults. But of course, I work at camp. And so I collect workbooks that are for kids or teens
Mhm.
for the activities that are in them. So I think, even if people don't have younger children that maybe the workbook is geared towards, it still could be really helpful for anyone who works with kids because you can pull out ideas of activities to do with kids or talk with them about. So that's how I use like this kind of workbook. So I had fun looking through it and seeing the different ideas that you have in there. What age group are you gearing this workbook towards?
It's such a great question. And just to piggyback on what you last said, I mean, I wrote it so you could go from beginning to end, but exactly what you said, there are moments when there's worry or there's something particular going on that you want to help someone with. So I think that that's a great idea to pull from it and you sort of go from there. But who did I write it for? What age group? So really K-8. I mean, it's really first grade to 8. I mean, I would think second to 8th grade could do it on their own. First grade, they might, depending on the child, might need assistance. I was surprised. I was at a meeting last night because I'm building a charter school. So that's a whole different subject. Yeah, that's a whole different ball game. But so I'm working on that. And there was a kid in the room, so I gave her the workbook, an advanced copy, and she thought I was just giving her to look at, but she was 12 and she's like, oh, I can have a copy. So she was really excited. So I was happy to see someone in that age group also was like, this is stuff that I can walk through on my own, and that, whether she talks to her parents or not, it's something that she can sort of nurture in herself.
Well, and I think it's very approachable. And that's why the workbook format, I've always really liked that because even people who, really dense text usually makes people go, oh, it's too much. I don't have time for this. I don't want to take all the time. Just tell me what to do. And a workbook is kind of just like the telling you what to do without
Mhm.
all of all the back information about the research of why you're doing
Mhm.
it and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So why don't you share just like a sample of, oh, actually, before we start, are you still working directly with kids as a
Yes.
psychologist? And so what
Yeah.
is your work like? What's your balance of work? I know you do speaking and you work with
I-
teachers and parents. Is the bulk of your work still with children?
Yeah, 2 days a week I work with kids. So that's the sort of the process for me. And it's really all day long. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of it has been Zoom. So, I mean, the thing I love about Zoom is you could be anywhere in the world. You don't have to be the United States. I am unfortunately limited by just speaking English, but people wherever. And I've had a special knack with these highly sensitive kids. So these kids that have these big emotions and that
Mm-hmm.
can go in sort of any direction with them. So helping them go in a constructive direction has been great for me. I feel like it fills my happiness bucket too, obviously, but I'm sort of the person that I would have liked to have talked to. Do you know what I mean? So that feels good.
That's so great. So are most of the kids, like, are they just their whole age range? Like up to what age do you work with usually?
It's usually elementary. So K to
Okay.
8. Yeah. High school, I have worked with some kids in high school because kids get older. But usually that for me personally, I feel like that's such a special niche
Mhm.
that they're best served by someone who works primarily with high schoolers and young adolescents.
Right, right. Okay, well, this is fun. Why don't you share maybe just like one or two of your favorite activities from the workbook, just to give listeners an idea of the types of things that you're encouraging kids to try to improve their mood, to increase their happiness.
It's such a good question. Let me look. Let's see what we got here. I mean, the one piece that I was thinking of that I love, I had written an article for Psychology Today online recently, and it was sort of like, how do we help our kids become happier, right? So one is the idea of gratitude, right? So, gratitude is that feeling of thankfulness, but appreciation is more of demonstrating the gratitude. So so there's a practice, maybe every night you do the 3 good things, like Martin Seigelman said. You know what I mean? I do the 5 good things every night because I try to juice it up a little. Obviously some nights are easy, some nights are harder, but we can always get to 5, whether it's, I saw this beautiful thing and whatever it may be. So I like that idea of really doing a small practice, feel good practice with kids. And then the next step would be appreciation, right? So I'm a big believer in going back to the old fashioned writing a thank you note, making cookies for the neighbor, helping someone take out their garbage if they're not really mobile or whatever it is, sort of show, even volunteering to walk dogs at a shelter. So I'm a big believer in going out and doing something and showing your appreciation, or maybe having a lemonade stand to raise money for refugees. So something that really shows their appreciation, I think, is good for kids. And it's fun because it builds your connection, right? You both do it. You both feel good. It's filling your happiness bucket. And then I also like the idea of like reframing. So a lot of kids, kind of like adults, we all get stuck in our thoughts sometimes. So more like middle schoolers, if someone was, and you have to start small, it can't be like climate change, but like a small problem, like I lost my favorite hat or something, using like a box, putting the problem in the middle of the box, and then helping them and say, all right, we need to come up with 4 other ways to look at it. What 4 good things or positive things can potentially come from this, to help them unstick their thinking? It could even be like, hey, I have to go to a new school next year. Well, like, what good can come? I could maybe meet a new best friend. I could have a new hobby to learn, like learning how to look at it in more of a positive light, learning how to reframe, because I really feel, and I know that the research shows, is that you have to build that resilience muscle, right? You have to be able to, when challenges present themselves, learn how to look for the good things, even though they're challenges. I mean, of course, some days are lemons and they're just lemons. That's the way it goes. But if we can learn how to make lemonade, it's just more helpful for us in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, these are all habits and skills that are helpful at any age. So if we can have our kids start doing it as a younger age, what a great, jump they have on kind of future well-being and happiness by practicing early. Yeah, I've been at camp. I've been promoting what we call happiness habits just at camp, and just kind of sharing little ideas. And I even made a little like passport book for the kids where if each thing they tried, they could like check it off, and like just as a way of like, while you're at camp, try experiencing some of these things, see what sticks, see what makes you feel better. Like, do you feel any different after practicing gratitude, or after doing some of these things, or taking a 10-minute brisk walk, or talking with your friend, or laughing about something? So I love your philosophy and the focus of this book. Just switching gears a little bit, I would just be curious, the last time we talked, it was 2019. And, we were talking then about just, the concerns about children's mental health and well-being. And now, from your experience of what you've seen now over the past 3 years, and especially with the pandemic and all the disruptions of that, what are you seeing just with your families, or, in your sphere of people you talk to, about what's going on with young kids?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a grouping of kids and families that are experiencing great loss. So that's not a short process to go through. So there's a group that are needing help on how to go through loss. And it's just it's a natural part of life that we all experience on this planet. So that's one piece. I also think a lot of kids who haven't learned prior to the pandemic how to sort of regulate are experiencing more challenges, because there's more stress, and depending upon the family and the school system and the support system, they're hearing words like learning loss, you need to catch up. So there's like other stressors added, versus them saying, hey, it's almost like some districts say, hey, emotional health is the most important, but you have to take all these tests and you have to do really well. So it's like, how do you reconcile these competing things when we're saying, hey, we want you to feel your best and then do your best? So what I'm seeing is, unfortunately, a little more pressure and stress versus it being relieved. And I'm just the type of person that tells parents, like, hey, there is no academic emergency. There just is not. When your kids feel good and they're taking care of their emotional health, they can do good. So we need to square one. And we all know that in the classroom. Like, if you're upset, you're not hearing a thing anyone's saying. So I just see that, we really have to, not just in words, but in actions, have to focus on helping kids feel their best and then do their best. And of course, there are certain developmental windows where it's easier to learn different things, but we shouldn't put our projections onto kids saying there's huge learning losses. It's like, all right, we are where we are. Let's do our best to either move forward. I hate the idea of putting onto kids learning loss, because then they feel bad as if they've done it. You know what I mean? So I think our languaging needs to be sensitive to, because kids create their world from what we say to them. So being really sensitive to how we communicate is important. And listen, I get it. We're all under different stressors. So no one's perfect and no one's supposed to be, but we as adults can always say, hey, I could say that better or repair something.
Yeah, it was interesting because a lot of times I think parents don't realize how much kids are listening, even when we're talking about things
right
to other adults, but they're listening. And this is a good example that if they keep hearing like, oh my gosh, I'm not caught up or I'm behind, that can be really stressful, especially for some kids, I imagine.
Right. Yeah. And like you just said, it's interesting to me. It's like you think they're over on because they have a computer or they have something in front of them. So you think, oh, they're not listening, but they are tracking everything you say. That's always the case. Right. And they're not missing a beat. Right. So, yeah. So it's very interesting. But I think, really doing things to connect and to keep the lines of communication open and build that trust is important now, because some kids make not so smart choices. That's just the way life goes, and we've all made them, but you want to make them that they're fixable and repairable. But having that open communication and trust, I think, is important, because when someone does get in trouble or they do make a mistake, they can contact you versus feeling like, oh no, I'm going to get in trouble. So from my standpoint, it's like, it's probably basic stuff, but I think we all have been parented differently. And unless we take a pause and think about, what did my parents do that were really great, and what can I continue, and what do I throw out quickly? I think that's sort of a good conscious parenting path.
Sure. Yes. As you were talking about the ideas from your book, I was thinking these are also just things that, as a family,
Right.
even if your kids were younger, you could just kind of look through it and say, oh, maybe as a family, we want to start doing this activity or something. I'm going to pull up, you were kind enough to send me the PDF early release. So I'm just pulling it up. And first of all, it's beautiful. So I hope you'll share with me a picture of it so I can share it with listeners.
Absolutely.
Put a link to it and everything. But it's a beautiful, it's just very appealing. Just
the
very
cover
happy.
or inside?
Yeah. Well, everything, the way it's designed. The cover is happy and everything else. But you have it designed into basically 3 different sections. Section 1 is understanding emotions. Section 2 is expressing emotions, and section 3 is becoming happier. So I think the things you mentioned before were about kind of like gratitude and optimism, but I'd love to talk a little bit just about, because this is something that I've become very focused on, is emotional literacy, and sort of the idea that one of the things that we really need to do to help our kids is to get them more aware of the whole range of emotions that all humans have, and that there's nothing wrong with them, because they're having these emotions. So why don't you just talk a little bit about how you describe to kids and how you describe to your clients emotions? What are emotions?
Sure. I always think of personally as emotions as energy in motion, but they're really just pointing to what we're feeling inside. So it's sort of like it's just a direction. Okay, this is what we're feeling inside. It's temporary. In my book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, I list 7 ideas that are really important to remember. But one of them is it's temporary. And another is there are no bad or good emotions. They just are. And it's really what we do with them that matters. So it's a nice way to think of emotions is they're like a sign. Green, red, or yellow, right? They're just what's happening. And as we become more aware, as younger people and older people, of like what our personal signs are, like before we get epic anger, right? We get a little annoyance, we get a little frustrated, we may feel resentful. We start building until we get angry, and then we get mad. So, and of course, with a kid, their energy is moving so quickly, so they don't have a lot of time. But as we help them learn how to slow it down and become more aware, what are their physical, I want to say symptoms, but what are their signs in their body? Like when I talk, there's one exercise about giving yourself an anger name. You know what I mean? So that, I call myself Mad Mo, and I usually only get it in traffic. Living in greater San Francisco Bay Area, I was like, oh my God, I'm on a 1-lane highway. I need to get to the bank. It's closing. You know what I mean? Something silly. And then I'm like, I gotta let it go. But we all get those feelings and that frustration. And it's like, okay, we have to really check ourselves, right? And what do I do with it? But kids get the same thing, whether they make their fists or they get red in the face or their heart beats fast, or helping them begin to pick up on their signs so that they can make a better choice. Because when they learn that they're at choice, they always have a choice, they can make better choices. But most kids don't realize they have a choice. It's just knee-jerk reactions. So that's a big piece of the emotional health puzzle.
I wonder if, do you have any favorite tools that you show kids about emotions? Like, do you use colors? Do you use recently I've really been interested in Mark Brackett's work, The Permission to Feel, and his mood meter.
Right.
Do you use any of those things with kids? Like, do you find that helpful to kind of give them a visual or a color or something like that to help with understanding emotions?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the colors and emotions and tracking them. But since emotions and color are culturally based, meaning like one color is different in a different culture, I'm a big fan of children making their own project books. And like, this is the color that feels anger to me. This is where I feel happy. And this is, so creating their own composite, I think, is helpful, especially if you work with a really diverse population. But I'm also we all need visuals, but kids absolutely need visuals. So the idea of working like with a volcano with anger, it's very simple. But the idea is before that volcano erupts, there's volcanologists, scientists who are checking if the earth is moving, what's the temperature inside. They are monitoring so that they can clear it away so that no one is hurt if there's a volcano eruption. So thinking about our own bodies the same way, like how do we really genuinely connect, whether it's to our breath or what are our anger signs or, something like that, I think is helpful. Because in order for it land in a child's mind, it has to be physicalized. So it has to be something they can smell, see, touch, taste,
Yeah, I love Dr. Dan Siegel's Flipping Your Lid. We teach the campers that because it really it resonates because they think about, you can think about like your parent or teacher or somebody who's just gotten, their face gets red and they get really angry or something, because everybody does it sometimes, and how it happens to all of us. And it's because things have been disconnected and we have to sort of get our thinking brain reconnected by breathing or thinking about different things. So I love all the picture things we're talking about this summer. This is why I asked, because we were talking about trying to get, besides the flipping your lid, kind of some common language around feelings. So we've been talking about maybe using the colors of the one, that Brackett uses, only because for a community to be able to say, I'm feeling just kind of blue right now. I'm a little down. I'm just sort of low energy, just not very positive, whatever it is, for the adults to be able to talk about it, for the kids, and for us to all sort of be use that kind of language. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on that? Because I know culturally, it could be that the color is different, but if you're a community and you're trying to figure out how to talk together and understand each other, what do you think in that case?
Well, I think it's a great idea because whether it's a community like the camp you have or a classroom, you need a common language. So creating that common language or using Mark Brackett's the colors and stuff like that, I think is super helpful, because you can also present it in a way like, hey, this is our program. If you feel strongly that some of these colors don't represent your emotions, let us know. Do you know what I mean? Giving kids a little bit of a choice and saying, hey, this is the way we talk about it and these are the common languages, but if you feel really strongly that orange is something else for you, you know what I mean, giving them an out.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. As we were just talking, I was thinking about, I don't know if you're familiar with Generation Mindful. They have a really cool, they have this stuffed animal that I gave to a couple of kids that are good friends of ours. And these stuffed animals have these little things that come out. They're on a string and they're different colored little puffy things in different shapes. And it's a way for young kids to talk about, you talk about what each one represents in their different colors. And so it's there's a red one, I think, and there's a blue one, or I don't know, all the different colors, but I guess it's been really useful for this family. The kids know how to grab their little snuggly thing and then pull out a thing. So even if they don't have words to describe how they're feeling, they can use that. So it's a really interesting concept to me. And I think something that, gosh, I think maybe some adults we could all use some,
Well, yeah.
some more tools.
Right. I had a tool like that. It's somewhere in my office, but it was something just like that where you was a stuffed animal and you took out the words and they were different colors. And I, in my mind, thought, oh, it's for younger kids, right? So I was working with a bunch of middle schoolers and early high schoolers, and I started using it with them, and they just had all these great stories with it. So it wasn't age determinant at all, even though technically it was for younger kids, So I agree with you. It can be helpful.
Yeah, and if you normalize talking about it, this is one of the things we're always trying to do at campus, normalize talking about the different things so that kids do feel comfortable sharing about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and getting closer because of that vulnerability. So yeah, it's interesting to think about the different tools that we might be able to use. All right, so let's just, we have a couple more minutes. Let's just talk a little bit about, I'm curious about your creating calm, which is under your section 2, expressing emotions. I feel like that kind of goes to that self-regulation piece that we have all learned. I mean, that's become so central to everything that I've been learning about, how adults working with kids, we need to co-regulate, like model for them, help them calm down. So it's like that whole, don't join their chaos, whatever, bring them calm. I don't know the quote. I think it's Eller Nost has that quote. But so why don't you talk a little bit about your, what you share about calming down?
Sure. In my prior book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, it has these 3 steps, and we have it in the workbook as well. The first one is to stop, sort of catch yourself. That's really like, we all know that if you don't catch yourself, you're in a different direction. So helping kids slow down and learn how to stop and catch themselves. The second is sort of the calm and center. So calming, and it's really centering, because you may be too up or too down. It's like coming back to your center and calming. And then third one is making a smart choice. So I define the smart choice as a choice good for you and good for others. So oftentimes that requires a coping skill, walking away, taking a deep breath, doing something, or thinking about something different. But the idea of calming, especially for our world, which is so chaotic and uncalm lately, I think you're right. If I was to give a parent, a teacher, a professional one thing to do, it would be work on calming activities, because that is something that we don't just do once or like once a week. It's something that if we do every day, you're creating the pathways in the brain for the child to have, versus a knee-jerk reaction. Their habit is maybe to go in their room and calm. For example, I work with this family, and they set up a peace corner in the living room, and it's got all the fun things for a younger kid to do, whether it's crayons and clay and a headset for music and books and stuffies. But, he goes there and learns how to self-regulate and go back to his center and calm. And when he sees mom or dad getting upset, he's like, you need to get to the corner. So there's a family experience. And like you said earlier, it becomes a common language where we normalize having big emotions, whether it's frustration or anger or joy or happiness or gratitude. It's like, when was the last time we actually had tears of gratitude? Like, being able to deeply feel is a gift, and kids have that naturally, and helping them learn how to choose the thoughts and have the feelings that help them move in a constructive way is really, I think, our biggest role as adults. And I think you're right with the co-regulation. As much as we can keep it together, we can help them keep it together, but we're not supposed to be perfect. I think it's really like, I think the repairing the relationship is really important. I think sometimes we have to go back and say, hey, I could have done that better, or I'm sorry. I think that's shows kids that like, oh, I can trust you. You're not just being another adult who wants me to do XYZ. You really are someone that I can lean on.
Yeah. Well, I just love this workbook. I think it's such a great tool, and it's so accessible, like so accessible. I'm just looking at the page before the more to do about calming, and it's like the different breathing: flower breath, hot soup breath, the 5 for 5, hand on the heart. I've heard that a lot about how usually one hand more than the other kind of makes you feel calm. So this is it's such a great tool. So who do you hope will get this workbook and use it?
What a great question, right? So that's sort of my hope or my prayer, is that, it gets into the hands of the kids that can really use it the most. So whether it's elementary kids, really K to 8, that can create that foundation of what emotions are and what do I do with them, so that they have what we're, like you said earlier, like a jump, that they can move forward to have a healthier, happier life. My hope is that it helps them avoid some of the unnecessary bumps. We all know that there are some bumps in life. That's just the way life works. But if we can avoid some of the unnecessary ones and develop that resilience and that fortitude and that ability to bounce back from challenges and move toward happier life experiences, I think that that's the goal.
Most definitely. Well, any parting words or closing thoughts about this workbook or kind of encouragement for parents and teachers during this time? Because it's been a rough go for people who work with kids. I know two of my kids are teachers, and just there's a lot of dysregulation and a lot of just kind of chaos in school specifically, or some schools. What's your encouragement or words of wisdom for us during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the only thing to think about is it's not going to last forever this time. I mean, that's hopeful to me, right? To have that wider perspective and to also realize, as we're all experiencing, children and adults who are displaying some emotions and behaviors that are not ideal, it's really it's like they're having an emotion that they don't yet have the skills for. So just keep that in mind when something's coming at you and you're like, whoa, what's going to happen here? It's like the more we can develop patience and forgiveness and do our best to help someone along the path, in a healthy way, I think that's important. And it's not easy. Planet Earth is not an easy planet to attend to. Do you know what I mean? We did not pick this for an easy ride, but it can be joyful and it can be great and we can make a difference. And these kids have this brilliance and smarts and, we need their brilliance. So whatever we can do to help them on the way, I think is useful.
Well, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and for this new book and all the previous books you've written, because I look that you have beyond just the emotionally healthy child. You have so many great resources on your website. Where can people find you and the book?
Sure, growinghappykids.com.
All right, easy enough. I'll put a link and as well in both the show notes and on Facebook. Thanks so much for coming on today, Maureen. It's been great reconnecting with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
As always, you can find notes, links, and other resources related to today's conversation by visiting my website at sunshine-parenting.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for my email list so that you don't miss out on any of the great resources I have available for raising thriving kids. Hey listeners, if you enjoy the ideas I talk about with guests here on the podcast, then you might really enjoy my book, Happy Campers: 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults. In Happy Campers, I share research-backed strategies that I've used at my summer camp for more than 35 years and in my own family, raising my 5 kids. I cover ways you can create a happier, more connected, more positive family culture. And I specifically share ways you can help raise kids who are optimistic, kind, resilient, and are better at making and keeping friends. Here's an excerpt from Camp Secret number 8, Make It Cool to Be Kind. While our hackles will naturally rise and our protective instincts will kick into gear upon hearing about someone saying or doing something mean to our precious child, it serves us well to remember that, unfortunately, mean people will be a part of our child's world forever. Instead of jumping in to intervene and rescue our child from the pain, we usually serve them better by teaching them how to respond with compassion and curiosity. Launching a school-wide, adult-driven attack usually doesn't work because adults are notoriously bad at figuring out the root causes of meanness. Often, the kids perpetuating the cruelest acts are the ones viewed in a positive light by adults. Our kids' social lives are extremely complicated, and often the kid committing the unkind act is doing it at the urging of another kid. We need to encourage our kids to talk with us about negative social experiences, explore the possible whys together, and ensure that they don't get led down the road to meanness. I'm Audrey Monkey. Thank you for joining me for the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. Join me again for more conversations about raising kids who become thriving adults.